Okay, so we'll be giving this talk split in two parts. And the first, we'll be talking about this new edition we're preparing of the Ars Grammatica. The first part will be on innovative digital models we are using in our project. I'll be talking about this. The second part will be on the early findings of our explorations on the history of transmission. Priscian and Elena will be talking about this in the next 10 minutes. The Pages project is acronym. This is a ERC project. The principal investigator is Professor Michela Rosellini at the Sapienza University of Rome, where we are right now. The acronym is short for Priscian's Ars Grammatica in European Scriptoria. In fact, the scientific interest of the project is not only in a new critical edition of Priscian, which is very much needed, but also in the transmission and the reception of this very influential work in the Middle Ages and until the Renaissance, hence the mention of the Scriptoria. We're going to produce a new critical edition, which will have two different outputs, one in print and one in digital. This picture here is from the series in which the print edition will be hosted, the Collectanea Grammatica Latina, from another volume. But the digital edition will have additional features that I'm going to expose and describe right now. The project has started in January, so we are in the early stage of our work. We're collating the manuscripts and creating and perfectioning the digital model that will bring to the digital output. So the features that will be shared by both the print and the digital editions are the textus constitutus, of course, the critical apparatus, and the translation. The book will have an Italian translation. The website, so to speak, the digital critical edition online will have an English translation. But additional features that will be specific to the digital edition will be, for example, on the Greek text, which is a specific focus of our project. We are going to provide in the critical digital edition, so online, the diplomatic transcriptions for each witness, which we're not going to do in the traditional printed apparatus. Why? Because they are of cultural significance per se, as a link, a bridge between the Greek and the Latin culture in the Constantinople, in which Priscian wrote, but also because they're very significant for the reconstruction of the stemma, of the relationships between the manuscripts, and Elena is going to talk about this in detail. So online, the reader will find transcriptions of the way that each scribe, transcriptions of each manuscript for the portions that are in Greek, included in the Ars Grammatica. We're also going to provide full transcriptions of early medieval glosses to Greek text. This one in the image, for example, is a small glossary in the margin in which the scribe is transcribing a translation of a number of words. And we're also providing in the digital edition full humanistic interpolations of Greek passages. Another digital feature will be, only digital, will be for literary citations of Greek words and for literary citations of Latin works, literary works that are lost, we're providing, again, diplomatic transcriptions for each witness and the digital annotation of the origin. So Virgil 215, Enid 215, for example, with the CTS DTS protocol, which is a technicality that digital humanists will like, but in a few words, this will allow the user to navigate between Priscian's text and the original text if they want to. And the CTS protocol will allow the computer to compute those literary quotations in a formal way. For example, to provide automatic indexes of quotations belonging to a work or an author, and searches of quotations of a specific author, etc. Another digital feature will be a semantic annotation of grammatical concepts. This is something that has already started in a parallel project, a national project. It's called TEI-XML, transmission of, what's the AL for? Transmission of
transmission of ancient linguistics.
Of ancient linguistics. I'm sorry, I forgot the names of this, but this is another project I'm involved too. And so the project is parallel to Pages, and Elena, who is actually sitting next to me, is suggesting me the name of it. They have started with that project, and that project annotates grammatical concepts not only in Priscian, but also in other ancient grammatical works. One example of a grammatical category that they are tagging, and Pages will soon be tagging, is, for example, all passages in Priscian or other grammarians, but Pages is only working on Priscian, all passages in which nouns with uncertain gender this concept is mentioned. Okay, we're also going to, and we're also we have already started encoding non-textual data, non-philological data, not strictly philological data, such as, for example, we produce a catalog of Priscian's manuscripts of the 8th to 10th century, a catalog of Greek hands in Priscian's manuscripts. The software you're using for this is called Cadmus by Daniele Fusi of the Venice Center for Digital and Public Humanities. So we're not encoding in TEI directly, but we will be exporting in TEI. So Cadmus is a software that allows digital humanists to model their data in a complex manner. For instance, the project elaborates a data model, a shape, a formal shape to give to the data, and this is handled by Cadmus in a very flexible way, much more flexible than TEI-XML could do. This is just an example of how we're modeling quotations, for example, what information we're giving for a quotation of an ancient literary work. This is just an outline of all forms of text, and this is even more complex to surprise you. This is the general data model. It's quite scary. The left side is all non-textual information, codicological and paleographic information. This could not be done with the same flexibility with TEI-XML per se, because XML imposes you one hierarchy. So you have to fit everything in one hierarchy, which is originally thought as a book, chapter, paragraph, etc. But we are exporting from Cadmus to TEI-XML. We're thus producing a critical edition. We're certainly going to produce a Textus Constitutus, an apparatus critical, but will our edition be a digital one? In a pretty famous definition, Patrick Zale, whose picture you see here, has written that the scholarly edition is truly digital if it cannot be given in print without a significant loss of information and functionality. So it must include more information and more functionalities. Daniel Kish, in a recent Oxford seminar, participated to intelligently and disturbingly argued that if you have enough pages of print, if you print really huge volumes, you can fit in as much information as you want. And this is a pointy reflection. So I think that he's right in this respect. Obviously, it's not very practical to print thousands of pages in print, but the key feature of a true digital edition is functionality. Additional functionality. An digital edition must function, must do things like software, something that the book cannot do. So we'll end up by exposing 3 examples of functionalities that the digital critical edition of Priscian will have and the book will not have. One is visualization of non-textual data. Elena will now be showing maps generated with software, obviously, of manuscripts based on their collocation, divided into branches of the tradition. So this branch of this tradition is collocated in this area. A non-textual dynamic visualization is something that a digital critical edition can have as an additional feature, truly digital. Another functionality can be dynamic indexes. You can have indexes in the print version, but you can generate dynamic and always updated indexes on all that information in the digital medium, of all that information that you have formalized, including manuscripts, Greek hands, linguistic concepts, etc., etc. All those examples of information can generate dynamic indexes, but they can also generate searches. You can create an advanced search for each kind of information, category information that you have formalized in our database. Crossing the information above. These are this kind of search functions that nobody can use because they're very difficult to use. But once you learn how to use them, they're very powerful to do very tailored searches. For example, you can search text in glosses to Greek text. Searching glosses from specific manuscripts that come from specific geographic areas. You can filter scribal hands, manuscripts, etc. Okay, and now I hand it over to Elena for her part of the presentation.
Devi interrompere la...
Stop sharing screen.
So, hi everybody. The main objective of the Pages project, as Paolo told, is the study of the early medieval from 8th to 10th century tradition of the Ars Prisciani, in order to reconstruct both the new critical text of the work and its early scholarly reception. Therefore, the biographical and philological research about Priscian's manuscripts is being paralleled by inquiries about the cultural milieu of the Scriptoria, where the Ars was copied. The former editor of the Ars, Martin Hertz, who published in 2 volumes in 1855 and 1859 the first critical edition of the work, based his Constitutio Textus only on a dozen of 9th and 10th century witnesses in Carolingian and Irish minuscule. Additionally, he used the Parisinus Latinus 7530, a grammatical collection from Monte Cassino, end of the 8th century, that includes considerable excerpta of books 2, 3, and 18 of the Ars Prisciani. Hertz did not draw a stemma codicum. He pointed out only that his 3 manuscripts in Irish minuscule, GKL, respectively St. Gallen 904, Karlsruhe 132, and Leiden University 67, Grammatica. Among the Carolingian witnesses, Hertz believed Parisinus Latinus 7496, named R, to be the most authoritative one, so that he used often it as a codex optimus, preferring its readings against those of the rest of the available manuscripts. Leaving aside the first 2 centuries of the transmission of the Ars, for which only indirect evidence is available, and it points to southern Italy, the British Islands, and the Irish monastic foundation in Bobbio, northern Italy, I will now quickly survey the current knowledge about the manuscript tradition of the Ars Prisciani, first summarizing the progress in the studies over the last 250 years, then presenting the new findings that result from the ongoing project of the new edition of the Ars. Indeed, since Hertz's edition, substantial progress has been achieved in our understanding of the early medieval transmission of the Ars, also thanks to the cataloging efforts of Marina Passalacqua, Guglielmo Ballaira, Colette Gedi, and other scholars. Most importantly, in 2 papers published in 1977 and 1979, Mario De Nonno demonstrated that the existence of a southern Italian branch of the tradition independent on the rest of the manuscripts. This southern Italian family includes, along with the already mentioned excerpta in P, also a nearby complete manuscript, Vaticanus Latinus 3313, from Monte Cassino, beginning of 9th century, here Z, and a slightly later fragment of another manuscript now kept in Rome, Biblioteca Vallicelliana, possibly from Benevento. These 3 witnesses are devoid of the conjunctive errors that characterize all continental manuscripts, all descending from the hyparchetype he, but share in their turn other significant textual features. Therefore, they should descend from a common hyparchetype, here named psi. As far as the continental tradition is concerned, a few years ago, Michela Rosellini started the new complete collation of the 8th-10th century witnesses, comprehending 41 manuscripts and 60 fragments. She focused in particular on the tradition of the second part of Book 18 of the Ars, the last one. This final section of the work, consisting in a Greek-Latin syntactical lexicon named Attichismi by Priscian himself, is transmitted by less witnesses, 16 manuscripts and 3 fragments, and the rest of the work, especially then books 1-16. Furthermore, it contains extensive Greek passages in which it is easier to detect significant errors. In 2015, Rosellini published the new critical edition of this section of the Ars, along with the relevant stemma codicum, the first one ever drawn for the Ars Prisciani. This is a map of the 8th, 10th century manuscripts. Different colors correspond to different thematic branches. And here you see the stemma codicum drawn by Rosellini for the final section of the Ars. The ongoing ERC-funded project of the new critical edition of the entire Ars has now to face the collation of the about 100 early medieval witnesses for books 117 and for the first part of book 18. The manuscripts are here much more than in the Atticismi, and Greek passages are less frequent, which makes it more difficult to find significant errors in the tradition of such a work that met with early textual critical interest on the part of Irish and Carolingian scholars, resulting in contamination and scribal conjectures. However, it has already been possible to assess the high thematic position of a few manuscripts and to reconstruct the existence of hyparchetypes and of an archetype earlier in the stemma than the archetype from which descends the entire tradition of the Atticismi, alpha, that you see here. Indeed, not only in books 118, first part, is available the Southern Italian branch that is missing in the Atticismi, psi, but the ongoing collation of books 116 reveals that within the continental branch, he, one French manuscript, S, Parisinus Latinus 7506, and on the rest of the Codicus. One step lower, two manuscripts from central and northern Italy, respectively Bamberg 43 and St. Gallen 903, here named B and lowercase g, both from the beginning of the 9th century, are as well independent on alpha, from which all the remaining continental witnesses instead descend. B and lowercase g share some significant readings and therefore seem to draw on a common source, phi. As it is easy to understand, the acknowledgement of the relatively high thematic position of S and B and lowercase g, together with the long ago demonstrated independency of the Southern Italian branch, psi, enables a much sounder reconstruction of the readings of the archetype and, consequently, of the critical text. Here you see some images from S, B, and lowercase g. The assessment of the relationships among the thematically lower witnesses, namely the descendants of alpha, is still in part to be done. However, it is already demonstrated and noteworthy that all the manuscripts used by the 19th century editor Martin Hertz, except P, descend from alpha. In the forthcoming new edition, the text that Hertz established will therefore have to be changed hundreds of times, as far as we can already see. Most families can be rooted in a specific geographical area or cultural milieu. One in Fleury-sur-Loire and Auxerre, another one in Tours, a third one in Corbie and northeastern France, a fourth one in the Irish scholarly circles on the continent, possibly both in northeastern France and in St. Gallen and Reichenau. As the provisional stemma shows, in books 1 to 16, where S, B, and lowercase g are available, the research about the genetic relationships among the descendants of alpha bears little importance in the reconstruction of Priscian's text, but it is of the highest meaning for the study of the history of the transmission of the Ars, and in a wider perspective, for our understanding of early medieval textual criticism and scribal practices. At the moment, some trends peculiar to specific scriptoria or geographical areas can already be detected. For instance, the conjectures on the Greek parts of the text are characteristic of the Irish milieu. The collation of the direct tradition of Priscian's literary Subli Fleury. The collation of manuscripts higher in the stemma is peculiar to Courbet and Irish scholarly circles in northeastern France. Finally, abridgments of both linguistic and literary examples are a specific feature of the Southern Italian branch. Thank you.